Good morning and welcome to our first Law and Regulation Committee meeting of the new year. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bernasconi.
Here.
Councilmember Mendonça.
Here. This time I'd like to ask our city attorney to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, this time we will open it up to public comments. And again, this is a public comment on anything that is not listed on today's agenda. Seeing none, I will close public comment. We'll move into item 5 of today's agenda, which is the minutes from the prior meeting. Vice Mayor Bernasconi, any amendments or changes?
No changes.
Okay. At this time, I will put it back out to the public for public comments on today's item. Seeing none, I will close public comments.
We have a consensus to approve the minutes then.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, we'll now have a presentation from our Government Regulations Administrator, Mark Walensky. Good morning, Mark.
Morning.
And Rob Becerra, excuse me.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Mendonça and Vice Mayor Bernasconi. Once again, Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator, and joined by Rob Becerra, Program Manager. And the following report includes an overview of an assortment of 2-year bills with areas of particular focus on public safety, homelessness, housing, public works, information and technology, or IT, planning, and at the federal level, the appropriations process. As you know, this is the second year of the legislative session. As such, the year began with the legislature taking up the 2-year bills as well as the introduction of new bills. The bill introduction period ends on Friday, this year on Friday, February 16th. And now I'll turn it over to Rob to do his presentation regarding public safety. Rob?
Thanks, Mark. As Mark mentioned, today covering 4 bills specific to public safety that were 2-year bills carried over. These 4 pieces of legislation were items that we were tracking in the last cycle. 3 of the bills we had previously held a support position on, and 1 of the bills we held a watch position on, again, just to determine the ultimate impacts. The first bill, SB 796, threats to schools and places of worship. This bill is something that we have seen grow of greater interest as we see threats happen, bomb threats called into schools or acts of violence threatened upon places of worship. This bill works to combat that issue by increasing the penalties for any person who carries out such a threat towards a place of worship or a school. We have held a support position on this. We will continue to analyze this piece of legislation as with everything that has moved forward on the 2-year cycle to continue to see if it meets what we have put forward in the law and regulation policy set by you, the council. So we believe it does, and we believe we'll continue to hold the support position on that bill. Another bill we will likely continue to support is SB 325 by Grove, controlled substances and fentanyl. The crisis of fentanyl continues to be an issue here locally for us and across our state, across our nation. This bill specifically targets individuals who package or sell fentanyl that is attempted to look like candy, like food, something that would obviously make it marketable in the drug market, but potentially dangerous if found on the street for families, for children. And it would apply additional penalties to dealers and individuals who are selling fentanyl to resemble food or candy. Again, supported this position in the past, and we would recommend it to continue to support the bill moving forward. AB 1034 by Wilson specifically relates to we'll call it artificial intelligence, which is kind of this large umbrella that I think we're going to see a lot moving forward in this cycle. Law enforcement, facial recognition, and biometric surveillance. This bill, we have a watch position on to ultimately determine the impacts of it. But this bill is really attempting to get ahead of the capabilities of artificial intelligence. This bill would prohibit law enforcement agencies from installing, activating, or using biometric surveillance in connection with a body-worn camera. The long-range implications of this bill could potentially be what we use our traffic cameras for, our flock systems for, and then, of course, council funded body-worn cameras a few years ago for officers. So everyone is wearing a body-worn camera. We're watching this just to ensure that we can still use those tools as effectively as we have been able to in the past, and hoping that it won't put more limitations on how we use some of those new technologies that have really enhanced crime fighting for the department. And the final bill, AB 23, regarding theft. For many, many years, we have looked at ways to combat some of the challenges that have come from Proposition 47, which decriminalized a lot of crimes in our state. And this one is specifically looking at petty theft and shoplifting, reducing the limit from $950 to $400. We believe this is a small incremental change to Proposition 47 that will make it easier for law enforcement officials to hold people accountable who go into stores and steal items. We know that criminals walk into our stores in Roseville with a calculator to come right under that $950 threshold, and then go commit that same crime to another establishment. So we have supported this in the past. We believe we will continue to recommend a support position on AB 23. With that said, those are 4 pieces of legislation, again, that we've heard before. 3, again, supported. The government relations team would continue to recommend support position, and then watching the facial recognition, biometric surveillance in the future. Mark?
Thank you, Rob. And now moving on to homelessness and housing, the following 2 bills related to homelessness and 1 bill related to housing. AB 67 is the Homeless Courts Pilot Program. The city is supporting AB 67 for the opportunities that might be provided if the bill was passed into law. The bill would establish the Homeless Courts Pilot Program to provide comprehensive community-based services and address the legal needs of unhoused individuals involved in the criminal justice system. Specifically, this program would allow local jurisdictions to create diversion programs for unhoused individuals charged with infractions, misdemeanors, or low-level nonviolent felonies. It is modeled after several other successful homeless courts in the courts, which have proven to reduce barriers to services and divert unhoused residents from overcrowded county jail systems. Assembly Bill 1657, the Affordable Housing Bond Act of 2024. City has a watch position on this bill to understand the potential resources that might become available to address the affordable housing crisis throughout the state. According to a 2022 statewide housing plan to meet California's unmet housing needs, the state needs an additional 2.5 million housing units, including about 1 million units for lower income households. Just as a reminder to the committee, any support or opposed position on statewide bonds will be brought to the full council to determine per the city council's direction and its legislative platform policies. And then with respect to housing, Senate Bill 794, the California Environmental Quality Act, the city has a support position on this bill that would help minimize the impacts of California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, lawsuits on proposed projects. These types of lawsuits can entangle a project in the courts, often when the basis for the lawsuit is in question. This bill would allow an action to occur, but would require the action to be completed within 365 days of the filing. This change could possibly help to minimize actions that are without merit and help communities construct projects designed to meet critical needs in their communities. With respect to Public Works, Information Technology, or IT, and planning, Assembly Bill 7, the Transportation Projects Selection Process, the city has an opposed position on this bill due to the concerns that the proposed changes would or could have negative implications on the selection of potential Roseville transportation projects in the future. AB 1297, Public Restrooms, city also has an opposed position on this bill due to concerns regarding how the information would be used, that would be collected, where the city would have to do an inventory of all of the public restrooms that the city operates. It would include further requirements to provide access to these restrooms at times other than during regular business hours, and how the legislature would use this information in the report when evaluating the public's access to reliable public restrooms. With respect to information technology, cybersecurity preparedness, critical infrastructure sectors, the city has a watch position on this bill to understand specific elements of the plan, including a description of the need for greater cybersecurity outreach and assistance, goals of the plan, coordination methods with other state and federal agencies, an estimate of funding needs and potential funding sources, and a plan to evaluate the program's success and the implication it would have on the city's cybersecurity efforts. And with respect to planning, AB 978, the Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, housing projects, the city has a support position on the bill that would require a $1 million bond for CEQA challenges to housing projects. This could be a helpful law to disincentivize frivolous or malicious challenges to housing projects. And with respect to the federal appropriations process, last week Congress successfully managed to avoid a government shutdown after passing a two-tiered continuing resolution, which the President signed last Friday. The notable dates for this appropriations process now include March 1st for the Agriculture and FDA appropriations bill, the Military Construction and Veterans Administration bill, Energy, Water, and Transportation and Housing and Urban Development bill will run through March 1st, and the additional funding bills will run through March 8th. However, even with these new dates, the process going forward will be very challenging. There's about a four-step process that needs to happen within this time frame. So the first step will be that the top appropriators will have to agree to appropriation new top-line spending levels for all 12 individual bills. Once those top-line numbers are set, the 12 appropriation subcommittee chairs and ranking members will start trading offers on how to distribute their allocations among each department, agency, and program in their jurisdiction, while also wrangling over potential policy stipulations. The third step will then come into play, and at this point, there are conservatives who have failed for months to secure steep spending cuts, say they're very focused on securing major policy wins, which will be a process with deep, challenging implications to the overall process. And the final step is if lawmakers fail to pass a full-year appropriations bill over this period of time, senior appropriators are warning that it will mean another continuing resolution, this time through the rest of the fiscal year. They are counting on the threat of flat budgets and potentially devastating cuts to avoid that outcome, because if that outcome were to occur, a continuing resolution through September 30th, for instance, would cut non-defense budgets by a total of $73 billion from current levels. Separately, lawmakers are facing another potential sequester scenario thanks to a provision contained in the debt limit package passed last year. If the government is operating under any short-term continuing resolution come April 30th, there will be a $10 billion cut to the military's budget and a $41 billion cut to domestic programs. We have serious concerns about the implications of this for programs such as our housing program and transportation funding, as well as others. So with that, in conclusion, government relations staff continues to be engaged on advocacy related to the two-year bills and is actively reviewing new legislation as it's introduced. Additionally, we remain very engaged at the appropriations process to advocate for appropriate funding levels for the various programs and services that are important to the city. And with that, this concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rob. Vice Mayor Bernasconi, any questions?
Thank you for all of the information. Just a question or comment that I think would be really helpful just to explain again for either one of you is there are some bills that we look at that it's obvious why we would support it, and then there are some that we look at that we think we would oppose it, but you put a watch position on. So can you just explain the basis for that? I think mostly for the public too, to know that watch doesn't mean that we support it. It means we're trying to have an influence in the outcome.
And so there can be various reasons for that. Part of it will be as we're understanding, doing more research to understand what implications it might have, a bill might have on the city, where it's at its face value or our initial read, there isn't anything there that would allow us or take us in the position to support or oppose that bill. And so we're going to do additional research on it, but we're also looking at our partners in the legislative process. We're talking to our lobbyists, we're talking to our trade associations to understand how they're looking at those pieces of legislation as well. And so oftentimes we won't take that advocacy position, but we want to ensure that at the end of the session, if that bill is passed, that the departments know that those changes may occur or that they may have to do something new based on the new law. And sometimes, from a strategy standpoint, we as a city, our voice isn't as strong as a statewide organization or a utility, one of our utility partners. And so we'll take a watch position and let other organizations take a position that might be challenging for the city to take. And so it's all baked into the process of our review of not only of the legislation, but then our understanding of the legislative process and our relationships and standing with our electeds and at the Capitol. So it's really a multi-layered process that we go through in developing our advocacy position, be it watch, support, or oppose. And I think, and a final thought is that once again, though, we want to ensure that all of the bills that we're tracking at the end of the day, all the bills that are signed by the governor and passed and signed by the governor will inform will inform the appropriate departments of those bills that those new laws are going into effect. So at the end of every legislative session, the city is well informed about the new laws that have been passed by the legislature.
Thank you for reviewing that.
Anything else? I just had two questions. On AB, find it here again, AB 1034 on the facial recognition, if that does come to fruition and end up passing, because the way when you were describing it, what I picked up on is the recording aspect, preventing the recording. So if we already have, because my understanding is the dash cams and the body cams, that all downloads onto a server, and we keep that for a number of, period of time that's prescribed by our policy and by law. would we have to then scrub all of that because those technically would be recordings? Or would that just be if it passes from that date forward?
So to your point, although recordings are an element of this bill, I think what is the larger element that would have a potential impact would be this bill attempting to ban biometric surveillance, in that an officer's, in an example, body-worn camera could not have software put on it that said, if I visually come in contact with a known felon, send me an alert via my body camera, because this, my camera has identified via biometric surveillance. Now, the other element of, we'll say, biometric surveillance, one could infer that license plate readers, because they're reading the unique ID of a license plate, could venture into that space. This bill is not specifically banning license plate readers, but it's one of the reasons why we're continuing to watch it to ensure that it does not creep into the space of now we have tools on the street, our flock system, and now we're not going to be able to use them anymore because, in the 11th hour, license plate readers were added in.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. And then I just had one other question on AB 23, the theft shoplifting reduction limit from 950 to 400. So obviously that's a change to the language in Prop 47. So if that passes and the threshold is lowered from 950 to 400, would that also trigger a change in the fines, or would the fine be the same?
Great question. So the criminal penalty would follow suit with the lower threshold.
Okay.
And I will say one of the focus areas that the government relations team will bring back is there are a number of movements to try to adjust Prop 47. We share this one because it's continued to be supported by Cal Chiefs, and we feel the most likely to at least gain some traction to move forward. But there are some others on 47 regarding Prop 47 that potentially could have other impacts in the area of criminal sentencing. So a bit in alignment with your question as well.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's all I have.
Public comment?
I will open it up to public comments. Oh, bummer. Seeing none, we'll close public comments. I feel like we're letting them off easy, but okay. And I'll bring it back up here to the dais, and we'll move on to item 6.1, our state and federal priority legislation update.
Actually, 6.2.
Did I say 6.1? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I meant 6.2. See, I was so excited about that, I stayed on the same topic. We're going to hear from our electric department priority legislation now.
All right.
I saw him walking up. I knew where we were. I was just on the wrong number.
Thank you, Chair Mendoza. Good morning, Vice Mayor Bernasconi. In regards to our electric department summary today, I'd like to focus on a few issues. First, I'll be sharing about our physical security plan. We do have some state legislation. It'll be on renewable hydrogen. And then finally, we will wrap it up with a federal issue addressing domestic manufacturing of certain electrical equipment. On the physical security plan, back in 2013, there was an attack on the PG&E Metcalf substation in California. A gunman fired on 17 electrical transformers, causing more than $15 million in electrical equipment damage. Out of this incident, the following year, Senator Hill introduced Senate Bill 699, which directed the CPUC to adopt rules on physical security risks. This bill established a new requirement for electric utilities to develop their own physical security plans. Roseville met this requirement and adopted its first physical security plan in 2021. Our next updated plan is due and scheduled for completion in 2026. In the near future, Roseville staff and our other POUs across the state will begin a dialogue working together with our trade association, the California Municipal Utilities Association. This process will prepare utilities as they begin to analyze and update their physical security plan, which is due in a couple of years. We'll likely have more on this later on this year. We do not expect major revisions for our physical security plan in 2026, but more to come on that. As it relates to state legislation, we have a bill, Assembly Bill 1550, on green renewable hydrogen. This bill currently states that by 2045, all hydrogen produced or used in California for the generation of electricity or fueling of vehicles is to be renewable hydrogen. Roseville, other utilities, and the hydrogen industry are monitoring this bill for any potential implications that will define what renewable hydrogen is going to be. In this bill, also, state agencies are required to develop interim hydrogen targets. Depending on the restrictions in the final text, it could prohibit hydrogen use by certain generation facilities. Roseville is supportive of exploring any and all different types of power resources as long as they meet our goal of affordability and reliability for our customers. And last, on the federal side, distribution transformers has been brought up again. As you are aware, our department leadership has been very active in Washington, D.C., advocating with the APPA with federal leaders to support more manufacturing of distribution transformers. APPA recently sent a letter to congressional leaders. This letter supports the Senate Energy and Water Development Appropriations Bill. It includes $1.2 billion for domestic manufacturing funding. Staff will continue to advocate with our trade associations on this issue. The bill has a long road to get passed, but we will be supportive of it. There recently has been a loosening up of the supply chain for the distribution transformers, but it is a good thing to continue to support APPA and what they do on this issue, so we're not in a situation like we were the last few years. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Bernasconi, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions, just a comment. Thank you for staying on top of that AB 1550. I mean, that could get very restrictive for us very quickly. So
Correct.
I look forward to future updates at this meeting on how that's going, because just how you box that and phrase that's could be very concerning for us long term. So, all right, thank you. At this time, I will open it up to public comments. Seeing none, I will close public comments and bring it back up here, and we will move on to item 6.3 with an update from our environmental utilities regarding priority legislation.
Great.
Last but not least.
Good morning and Happy New Year, Chairman Donza and Vice Mayor Bernasconi. Noelle Maddock with the Environmental Utilities Department. For our report this morning, I will be covering state legislation that was introduced in 2023 and are eligible to move again this year. I will also provide an update on activities at the federal level. Before I jump into the high priority 2-year bills we're tracking, I would like to note that at the start of January, EU is tracking about 165 bills that were introduced in 2023. As of the January 19th committee deadline, approximately 75 of those 2-year bills failed the deadline, so we no longer have to track those. We're now tracking about 103 bills from the 2023 session, which will be in addition to all of those that are introduced this year. The 2-year bills need to make it out of their house of origin by the end of this month. And for all of the state legislation that I'm going to cover this morning, all of the bills have already passed out of their house of origin. So they could be taken up at any point in time, but we anticipate them not being taken up until towards the end of the year. So the first bill I'll cover this morning is AB 2, which is dealing with the recycling of solar panels. This measure would set up an extended producer responsibility program for customer-owned solar panels. The bill accomplishes this by adding the customer-owned panels to the existing Electronic Waste Recycling Act of 2003. The program would be paid for through recycling fees on the solar panels that are sold here in California. For solar panels that are not customer-owned, they would need to have a end of useful life management plan in place by January 1st of 2028. With the state's emphasis on the clean energy resources, Roseville is in support of developing pathways for the proper disposal and reuse of these items. This bill is currently on the suspense file in appropriations, and again, we wouldn't anticipate to see this move until the end of the year. The second item this morning is SB 707, which would create a first-of-its-kind extended producer responsibility program. We usually shorten that to EPR, program for textiles under the regulatory authority of CalRecycle. The producers of clothing and textiles would be responsible for implementing and funding programmatic plans that would facilitate the repair and reuse of clothing and recycling of textile fibers. The sponsors of the bill, which is the California Product Stewardship Council, held the bill in committee last year so they could work with stakeholders on it. Since the measure is already in the second house, again, we're not anticipating it to move until the end of the year. The next two measures are AB 460 and AB 1337, dealing with water rights. You may recall last year there were actually a number of bills introduced that were attempting to change the state's water rights system. Three of those measures gained a lot of the traction. Two of the measures were the AB 460 and AB 1337. These were actually the most problematic. Our trade associations were successful in getting these held in committee, while they obtained amendments to the other bill, which was SB 389, which the industry was able to move to a neutral on. So just to note, Roseville does not have our own water rights. We do contract with PCWA, Placer County Water Agency, for supplemental water supply. So we are coordinating our efforts on these measures with them. The next measure is SB 366 by Senator Caballero. California's hydrology is known to be either droughts or floods, feast or famine. In conjunction with the Bureau of Reclamation and other regional partners, the American River Basin Study predicts that we can expect our winters will become warmer, causing a change in precipitation patterns, which we would expect to see less snow but more rainfall. This shift poses a challenge to how our water delivery systems, the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project, were built and are actually managed. We have all experienced over the past few years, there's been a hyper focus on the conservation of water to meet the state's needs. 366 is actually a good step towards a comprehensive look at addressing the state's water needs by setting a target for creating new long-term water resources. Roseville is supportive of this balanced approach for long-term water resources for the state. Shifting the focus to federal issues, during the pandemic, the federal administration created the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, which was housed in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Department. It was created to help address arrearages that occurred for low-income residents, and it was actually modeled after the LIHEAP program, which is the Low-Income Household Energy Assistance Program. Senator Padilla is proposing to make this program permanent. Roseville is supportive of the senator's efforts to make this program permanent. However, we do have some concerns because his proposal is moving it from its current location in Human Services, Health and Human Services, over to EPA. We're just, with that switch, it's already been successful. With that switch, it comes new administration. We're worried about the costs of the administration of it and really would like to make sure that the most money is getting out to those who are in need of that funding rather than on creating new administrative procedures. The last item is the lead and copper rule improvements. We refer to it as LCRI. Just a brief history, in 2022, the US EPA adopted revisions to the federal lead and copper rule. The next year, in 2021, the federal government announced that they were going to immediately look at making improvements to the newly adopted lead and copper rule revisions. There's a lot of acronyms. It's improvements and revisions. As a side note, you may recall that we advocated last year on Assembly Bill 249, which was seeking to make amendments and require water agencies to do certain testing within schools. While we're not totally opposed to that, we had major concerns about the improvements going through while this bill, because it was in conflict with what we had anticipated. So in December, EPA finally released the draft text of the improvements. Roseville staff has been actively engaged with our trade associations in providing comments and reviewing their formal comments to the federal government. Roseville, again, has concerns with the improvements as they will require public agencies to conduct work on customers' private property to replace lead service lines, and it also reduces the action levels from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. It would also strengthen tap sampling procedures. Staff will remain engaged on this through our associations. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Noel. Vice Mayor Bernasconi, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for all the information.
Same, thank you for all your information. I did have one question now, because I can't read my own writing. On AB 1337, did you say we took an oppose or support on that?
No, 1337 we're still in opposition to.
Opposition to it, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will take it out for public comments. Seeing none, I will close public comments. And seeing no further business, we will be adjourned until our February meeting. Thank you very much.